All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time it is when you hear this message, I pray that you're poised to receive, to accept, and to respond to words of wisdom. Ashan. Have you ever had the experience where you were really sick, maybe bedridden for 2 or 3 days? Your energy level is like at a 2 out of 10, and you feel like, you know, as close to death as you ever want to be. And then you get some rest, maybe you take a little medication, and all of a sudden you go from a 2 to a 5, and the that energy level is so much higher than the 2 that you start to feel like, wow, I'm back on top. I'm alive and kicking. I'm ready to take on the world. And you do. You get all dressed up. You go and maybe you go out and party. You drink and you dance. Next day, crash. Crash. Sometimes you go back to a 2. Sometimes you may drop even lower. You may hit a 1, right? And I love that as an analogy for spiritual empowerment and the restoration of your spiritual identity. I find it to be a recurring theme amongst certain, percentages of people who I've worked with over the years, in the sense that our people, African American people in particular, are brought up in a sick environment, right? We are, deliberately made sick, and we can talk about all the sociological and political and economic, conditions that characterize that sickness. But I think you know what I'm talking about. It's like Bob Marley said, destruction of the poor is in the poverty. And so we come into an impoverished reality, and that is our norm. And it's within those conditions that most of us come into contact with Orisha, one way or another. Either we have an acute problem, or money problem, political problem, legal problem, health problem, or we are not necessarily grappling with an acute problem, but we just know that something's off, and we know that it's not going to be found in the church. The solution is not going to be found through therapy. The solution is not going to come from a courthouse. The thing that's missing has to come from the soul. And so we come to Orisha with a sickness, an unknown and unnamed sickness that may manifest with a variety of symptoms. Okay. And we're used to operating with an energy level of a 2. And then you meet your Babalawo. Okay. You meet me, and I start working with you. And month after month, season after season, quarter after quarter, perhaps year after year, you start to see incremental changes in some regards, and you get to see some quantum changes in other regards. And you go from a 2 to a 5 energy level. And you think you're on top of the world. You feel like you are, the Lord of the universe, and you start to make all kinds of assumptions, and you start to move in certain ways, and you start to have a certain kind of an attitude and demeanor and carry yourself in a way that, reflects someone who is wearing the crown and wields the scepter of authority. But you're just setting yourself up to crash. Okay. And it reminds me of one of my favorite Yoruba folk tales about Ajapa and Atioro. the bird. Ajapa is a tortoise, and every day Ajapa will go to the watering hole, and he'd be at the watering hole, and he'd be drinking water, and he'd watch the birds come flying in, right? And Ajapa was amazed to see the birds hover above the watering hole and the elegant way that they would, come in and land, and the way they would chatter and talk about things that they had seen in the sky. And they just would talk about things from an elevated, very uh, and lively perspective, right? Everything about the birds was very upbeat. Ajapa admired them. And as it were, Ajapa's very best friend was Atioro, who's also a bird. And every day, Atioro would listen to Ajapa, admiring the birds, admiring the way they could fly, being amazed at the things that they would describe, trying to imagine what this could be and how that could look. And every day, Atioro could hear the desire, the yearning in Ajapa's voice. One day, Atioro says, Ajapa, you really want to know what it's like up there in the skies, don't you? Ajapa says, oh, more than anything in the world. He says, okay, tomorrow morning, you meet me at the top of the hill. Next morning, before sunrise, Ajapa is there, ready. Atioro grabs Ajapa by the shell, he carries him up, and gives him a tour of some of the realm. Oh, Ajapa is amazed. Atioro, what is that incredible blue snake there in the grass? I've never seen a blue snake like that. Atioro laughs. Ajapa, that's not a snake. That's the river. Wow. The next day, oh, Atioro, what is that incredible rock over there with the really odd formations? I've never seen a rock like that. Oh, no. That's not a rock. That is the stone mountain. That's the mountain. He said, yes, that's the mountain. On and on every day. Atioro takes Ajapa over different parts of the realm. Ajapa is amazed by what he can see. Now, all of a sudden, his perspective is elevated. He's got a bird's eye view. He's thinking about everything differently now. He's seeing the orientation of the whole area in a completely different way now. And as he does, he can listen to the birds and hear what they're saying differently. He can understand what they're saying now. But just like they say, familiarity breeds contempt. Now, the things that Ajapa used to admire about the birds, when he thinks he knows the secret about how they can say what they say, now Ajapa holds them in contempt. He resents the birds. He starts to disrespect the birds. First, it's a murmur and a rumbling to himself. They're talking about all that as if they're the only ones that know. They're saying all these things as if they're above everybody. Finally, it gets to the point where Ajapa starts to verbally insult the birds, shouting at them from across the water, insulting them, calling them names, diminishing what they can see. Atioro is listening to Ajapa and he says, Ajapa, slow down a little bit. Why are you talking to the birds like that? Ajapa is indignant. Finally, it gets to the point that Atioro knows that something has to be said because the other birds are also complaining that Ajapa is really out of hand. We don't know where he's getting these ideas, and we don't know, how he even is able to say what he's saying. But he seems to have seen things from our perspective, but he's not respecting the fact that we are actually birds, and that's our domain. So one day, while Atioro is carrying Ajapa into the skies, he decides he's going to bring the subject up. He says, Ajapa, listen, I got to talk to you about the way you've been insulting the birds. I got to talk to you about your attitudes. It's not right, Ajapa is just so caught up in his own, self-aggrandizement. He says to Atioro, you're not my father. I don't need your approval. You don't need to agree with what I'm saying. He says, but Ajapa, I'm just trying to give you the real deal here. Like, the only reason you can fly is that I'm carrying you. Foolishness, crazy. Atioro, I don't need you. As a matter of fact, you can let me go right now. Atioro says, fine. He lets Ajapa go. You know what happened? Ajapa flaps his little arms as aggressively as he can, but he's just plummeting faster and faster and faster until he crashes onto the ground, breaks his shell into 20 different pieces. He's laying there, moaning, suffering. All the animals pass by. They look at Ajapa and they say, oh, how pitiful. But they don't even go to help him because they know Ajapa. They know what, they don't know what has actually happened, but they know the way he operates. They know that he has said something and he has done something totally selfish and without thinking enough into the future that somehow he has created this problem for himself. Nobody helps Ajapa. It is not until Ikumudum, the stink ants, they see Ajapa and they start to grab the pieces and they start to put them together and they start to reassemble Ajapa and they start to use their own resin that they gather up and they start to even glue the pieces back together. But they're stink ants. And so as Ajapa starts to feel himself get reconnected or recomposed, now he's that smell. Stink. You guys stink. Don't you bathe? You stink. Don't you wash your hands? You stink. And he starts to insult the stink ants. The stink ants say, Ajapa, wait a minute. we are the ones putting you back together. Ajapa starts to insult them. You're not doing anything for me. Stink ants don't argue with Ajapa. The chief of the stink ants just says, let's go, move out. We weren't finished putting you back together, Ajapa. But this time we're gonna leave you undone. And this is why the tortoise has a reticulated shell. It's got lines in it. Before, the tortoise shell was smooth like a bowling ball. But it was when he was broken and the stink ants put him back together, they refused to finish him and polish him off so that his shell would be a reminder of the disrespect that he has for his benefactor. And so it is for many people who practice Orisha lifestyle. You are only able to function and optimize your spiritual capacity as a result of the ashe of your benefactor. This is why we have Ijuba. This is why we recognize our teacher and our teacher's teacher and our teacher's teacher's teacher all the way back to the very first, all the way back to Olodumare. Because everything that you're doing is as a result of somebody else's support. Someone else is pouring into you. You may not know the extent to which your teacher is keeping you afloat. You may not recognize the extent to which your Oluwo is energizing you, shielding you, grounding you, covering you, guiding you. But that is the nature of our tradition. You're not doing what you do just based on the fact that you got dimples and sparkling eyes. You're not able to accomplish what you accomplish just because you got a bright mind and you like to work hard. All of those things are contributing factors. But in this tradition, you have to understand it's an unbroken chain that goes from one to the next. Everybody is fueling the next phase, the next wave of practitioners, students, devotees, disciples, apprentices, etc. So this is a message for all devotees, but is particularly important to the leaders. I want to address this to the leaders. If you're someone who is poised, ready, willing, and able to improve the world through positive influence, I want you to find out how Obafemi Origuwa and the Orisha Lifestyle Academy can help you take your practice and your life to the next level. Visit me at obafemio.com or orishalifestyle.com. Let's start working together to help you live the medicine that will heal your life and heal the lives of those who you are destined to serve. I look forward to working with you. Bye for now. Odabo.